We're starting. So what is important here is that I generated this application and it's in your cohorts folder, right? That is a Git repository. And there's a folder, pardon. Within that, there's an app folder, and within that, there's this thing. What does it mean? What?
It's a Git repository.
Mm-hmm. But it's a Git repository now within a Git repository. You see? Because that folder already gets some. Sorry, my cursor's gone. Gitsum is already a repository. You generally don't want to have repositories within repositories if you want to stay sane. It's doable to manage them, but it requires a lot of work, and I don't think, frankly, it's worth it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete it. So it's nothing in here. Because by default, Rails new app name just generates a Git repository within this, which is kind of cool, but I put apps within a repository, so I delete it. Just a side note, so you're aware. Cool, let's open the current directory in Atom. Cool, goodbye. What do we have here? Yeah, it's empty, cool. I'm gonna quickly start working with the doctors. I think the doctors should have just a name and specialty, right? That's gonna be simple enough. So how do I generate a model in Rails? What's the difference between resource and a model?
Generates controllers, leave folders.
What should we do? Resource, yeah. Rails G resource doctor. And I'm gonna say name specialty. Am I spelling it right? Cool. Oh, in terms of pronunciation?
No, it's a different word.
Like this?
Speciality.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, specialty. Speciality. Yeah, anyway. What kind of data type will these be? Strings. If we don't mention that, that's going to be a string. Nice, so let's see what resource as a command will generate us. Plenty of stuff, so we got migration, a model file, which is probably empty, an empty controller, and I presume there's some resources, right? Routes. So routes have been plugged into config, routes, resources doctors, so all 7 RESTful resources. We're not going to need all of them today, but let's keep at it. Let's leave it as is right now. Let's look at the controller, doctor's controller, empty, good. Model, doctor, empty, good. What else was generated? Views, doctors, but I think this is just an empty folder, which is fine by me. So, thinking how we should approach it. What I want to show you today is controlling params. I'm going to actually write it down to make sure that we cover everything that is in store for you today. Cover params, how to deal with them. After we do that, strong params. But does this ring a bell? You know what it is?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? Who has not been there yet? Cool. That's not bad. Strong params and partials. Okay. So, before we do anything, we need a controller and the view, right? What I want to focus on today is creating doctors, maybe looking at them. So I'm gonna go all in and just build out all the methods here, but I'm gonna leave the ones that I don't need yet just empty, so we can have an overview. So I have an index, show, new, create, update, edit, and actually that's going to be nicer if this is over here. Also, what's good about this if you haven't thought of it yet. In Sinatra, we had to like order them in a specific way because the routes would just crash. In here, it doesn't matter because routes are somewhere else. Def destroy, and there's going to be a private section for Dr. params and find doctor. Why? I'll show you soon. Cool. So the crux is the most important bit today is that we figure out how to create the forms. So there has to be a way of looking at all doctors, and there has to be a way of showing one of them and running new and create successfully, right? I think that's sufficient. So doctors equals doctor all, right? So by the way, I should have said that before I started. There's different ways of approaching solving a problem in terms of what you have to build in the MVC structure. Like it doesn't really matter what goes first. I'm approaching it now from a from a controller point of view, kind of like instead of setting up the views or routes or anything else. Routes are set up, by the way, because we have these resources, right? I'm just going to the model set up. So I have to choose between controller and the view, or both at the same time. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start with a controller, kind of declare what I want to have, and then start building views, right? That's my favorite approach, because I first talk about data and operations, what's going to happen, and only then I fit the views to interface with that. So the first thing, index just gets all the doctors, show, and then I'm specifically not going to do it yet. I'm just going to say it finds a doctor. You know that operation. Add doctor equals doctor find params. I don't want to write it. I'll show you why. New needs a doctor. Why? Why? We didn't do that in Sinatra, did we? Yeah, we didn't. So, do you know? Anyone knows why this is happening?
So that you can show it.
Did they have a form to add in Wikipedia?
There's one special thing in Rails, but yeah, if no one knows this, let's just keep a mental tab on it. This is important.
In new view, you need a variable.
We didn't previously in Sinatra. Now we need it in Rails. I'll show you why soon. Create is going to be very normal as usual. We go doctor create, and instead of passing the parameters by hand, I'm just going to say doctor params. All right. Just hold on to that. That's another point of interest in that controller today. Then redirect to doctor path. I think you're right. Thank you. Cool. Edit, empty, update.
Also, you're doing this in the model, aren't you?
Pardon?
You're doing this in the model, aren't you?
That's the controller.
But you're doing it
Oh
in the
yeah,
model.
it is on
Am I? All right. Silly me. Yeah. Let me just write it and
Finish it
then
and then
that's what I'm gonna do. Sorry.
Sorry, over here, if you wanted to redirect after create into the index rather than the specific doctor you created.
I think it will be just doctor's path. But I can't be sure to test it. But I think the default is plural of the resource underscore path. Update is just updating the doctor with the doctor params. For now, the doctor params bit, just treat it as a mental shortcut. Remember, we're not writing code that's going to run yet. Destroy is simple. We need the doctor to so find the doctor. And now add doctor. Destroy. Doctor's path. Cool.
And
in the update one.
Cool. And that kind of makes sense. So let's start.
so what does redirect to doctor?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm doing it off the cuff. So because Rails is very human-like in terms of what you say, I often just don't reference documentation, write it out. I'm going to run it and see what happens. I've done it so many times that, like, more or less, you've seen what Rails does when you do a little typo. It says, "Oh, I think you meant this." Pending migration. Rails db migrate. Sorry. Cool. Let's refresh that. Great. We should go to /doctors and get an error that there's no view. It's using a template for this request. There's no view for doctors, so let's do that. Very quickly, doctors, new file, index, HTML, sorry, RB, no, HTML RB, all docs. Okay, doctors. Add doctors, each do doc. That's gonna end here. That's gonna be an unordered list. That's my favorite style. Putting that. By the way, you know that this URL thing is just completely arbitrary, right? Like there's nothing to do with functionality. It's my way of putting it out there. So I'm gonna add the paragraph, and in the paragraph I'm just gonna say, I don't know, doctor name. That's all. So let's refresh the page. Sometimes it takes the longest time for like Rails to click onto anything. I don't know if you get that on your computers too. Yeah, cool. Works. There's no doctors though. So let's create some doctors. Rails console. Doctor create. Who wants to be a doctor?
Doctor Who?
Nice. But by the urgency in which you said it, you had it ready, right? Like it was here already. Next doctor.
House.
House. Specialty.
Can you put a star in?
Yeah, it's just a character in a string. Doctor. Create one more doctor.
Feel good. Indian Giants.
Feel good. Specialty.
Feel good.
All right. Go ahead.
Special food graphics machine. I'm sorry.
Also, as long as it's consistent, it's not a misspelling in programmatic terms. No, please do point out if I actually misspell things, but I think we settled on specialty.
Okay, yeah, that
Oh, specialty is not actually the word for this, is it? Specialty is like, oh, so you were just not being funny. That was actually,
It's American.
oh, that doesn't matter then. I thought,
It's the right spelling.
They're completely mutually.
I mean, yeah. Cool. I thought the specialty would be like, you know, specialty of a day in the restaurant. But if it also, yeah. Anyway,
It's just special. At restaurant, you would just say
my
special.
the part of my brain that deals with languages is melting. Anyway, I'm gonna put a nice little link to. Works, I think. Let's inspect.
Who house feel good?
That's grammatically correct, isn't it?
Only with doc.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? Because doc is a variable for every doctor, and Rails is nice like that. And I was like, I've got an instance. Let me give you a link. New file, show, HTML ERB, H1. We here have a add doctor name. P add doctor specialty. This doctor was what's the shortcut to open the emoji keyboard? There's one. Control Shift space. Emoji keyboard Mac. Command Control space bar. Command Control space bar. Yes. Gonna get a female doctor. Okay. And we're gonna get a male doctor. And a hospital.
Color as well.
We're gonna get a doctor of color as well. Can I change it? I mean, they're yellow. Calm down. They're emoji people. No one. That's not a real skin tone. Oh, also nice. Look at how it's encoded. It's actually female and doctor together. You see? Anyone knows how emojis are encoded? Yeah. So like, this is something for you to research on later on. Anyway, that's.
Actually, emoji flags are probably the most interesting use of that. They use zero width joiners and like country code things.
Good. Okay, anyway, jokes aside. We're like, we got stuff to do. No method error in doctor's show. Oh yeah, nice, good. So, I've shown you that I said find the doctor in here, right? Also, we have to find the doctor here. What did I do? Oops. Find a doctor. Show, edit, update, and in edit we need to find the doctor, right? So these are actually I said I'm not gonna do the whole thing, and I'm doing the whole thing, but this is good. So finding a doctor is an operation that we do in 4 places, right? What a good programmer is? A good programmer is first and foremost
Lazy.
quite lazy. So why don't we replace that at doctor? Because normally we would say at doctor find params ID, right? That's how we do it. But I'm not gonna do it because it's in 4 places. I'm gonna have a method, a private method called find doctor. It's gonna say doctor equals doctor find params ID, your usual thing. And now in here, I'm gonna use a macro called before action, and it's gonna run find doctor. 4 methods listed here: show, edit, update, destroy. Wicked, isn't it? So you can specify before action, run this only for these methods. And find doctor is a method, private method specified here. And that essentially just takes that little bit of code and plugs it in here.
What is it a private method? Or what's private?
Because, oh, you've never done private methods? Have they not been mentioned in the labs?
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen the.
So private methods are methods you can't access from outside of the class. I can't say doctor.findDoctor. It's only usable within the class. It's a design thing, nothing else. It's just for your own safety as a programmer that you will not be calling it from the outside. So you don't confuse it. These private methods are for the internal functions of the class, not to expose to the outside.
You don't have to be as careful with naming.
Hmm?
You don't have to be as careful with naming.
No, you always have to be careful of naming, for the sake of your own sanity.
Yeah, but private methods could be named the same thing in different classes.
Oh, certainly so.
Yeah. That's
But it's always the case. It's always the case. Because you always start with the class, so there's namespace to it. But anyway, so private methods are only accessible from within the class. That's the whole thing. There's nothing else specific about them. It's like a note to yourself saying, oh, this is only to be used within the class. Don't expose it. You don't need it. Then now let's look at the doctor, see if it works. Doctor Who, nice. Doctor specialty is literally everything. Cool, works. It's good if we can have a nice little link to go back. So link to go back. Doctors path. Your house. Go back. Feeling good. Cool. Works, right? Nice. So as I said, today's going to be about forms, params, strong params, and partials, right? So all of these things, bar 1, are going to happen in the views section. And I'm going to do something that you may have not seen yet, so hold on to your seats. I'm going to start the file with an underscore, right? I'm going to call it form HTML ERB. right? And this is where the magic happens. This is also coming back to me asking a question, why do we need add doctor for a new doctor? So bear with me for a while, I'll build it and then we're going to talk about it. So there's this nice little helper in Rails. This is Rails specific, this is functionality from Rails. If that's not clear yet, this is only Rails. That is called form4. It's not a part of HTML spec, it's Rails being nice. And the way it works is you say, as you can kind of guess, this form is for a given model, and it needs a model to function, even if it's a new form. Previously in Sinatra, these were just plain old HTML bits, right? And now, this form has to be model aware. So, form4 add doctor, do f, that's the syntax. If you want to know the syntax, you know where to go to, right? What's the website name? No. The Rails website. So that was Rails guides. Then the n is good for everything. That's good for Rails. But MBN is not good for Rails. Some Boolean algebra right there. Who had Boolean algebras? Who studied Boolean algebra? The universe equals something minus, no? No? Cool. Next time. F.label for name. F.text field for name. F.label for specialty. And F.label, sorry, text field specialty. And F.submit. And this is the whole form. Know where it's going, know what it's doing, no override methods, nothing else. We just say, hey, we want a form for a doctor, we're going to collect the name and the specialty. And there's a submit button, by the way. Thank you. Nothing else. Rails will set everything up for us.
And this would come with a standard form. So you have to specify anything.
Yes, I mean, it's just HTML. HTML doesn't know about how things look like. But the trick is, I've put it in a file called _form. That means this file is not a template in itself. This is something called a partial. As name implies, it probably can be reused in different places. And I do it specifically here and now because I'm using form4 and I want to show you how flexible of a helper that is. Because what we're going to do, we're going to create stuff and we're going to edit stuff, right? Normally you would have two different forms because you want an edit action to a different place and you want a new function to a different place, right? You want to create and edit things. Two different actions, one is a post, I mean both are a post, but two different, I hate the word action. The HTML attribute of a form action is where it goes to. So two different paths, right? Two different locations you send it to. But just so happens, using form4 in Rails, you don't have to do it. So let's start with the new form. Let's leave that file as is. I'm going to say new HTML ERB. I'm going to say create a new doctor. Right? And I'm going to just say link to cancel, just in case you decide not to do it. Doctor's path. And what I'm going to do here now is magic. So I'm going to say render form. So the way render as a method works, it's going to take this, which is a direct path to where the partial is, because we're in the same folder. You just say form. You don't have to go up, down, or anywhere else. And it's just going to render the form. I'm going to do the same thing for the edit page. No. And now I'll show you how this works. So let's see if it works. So we have routes, because I said resources for this, so that's got created. We have forms. So it should work. Cool. So I can edit a doctor. That works. And let's go to doctors/new, and that also works. So look at, because it's using just this little helper to render the form, and this is what we define. So this isn't enough. if you look at this only to like create a fully functioning form. So look at what Rails does for us. There's a form, has an ID, has an action, some other stuff that's regarding security. But what's important here is that in that case, when we are on the new path, it knows where to go to /doctors with a post. The rest of the form is as you would expect. But if we go to doctors, I don't know, 3/edit, this form will automatically know where to go. Now it's going to a particular doctor, as you would expect per the RESTful specification, sending a post and everything else.
Change the submit button to update.
Yeah, it also automatically says update doctor, unless you specify otherwise. Yeah.
And if I want a different styling, then I use CSS.
Yes.
Yeah.
CSS. It's completely separate to what we're doing.
If you wanted to change it from update to edit, how would you do it?
You would go to Ruby on Rails guides, form 4, search for the action view form helpers, command F for form 4, and enter your way through it. You can see you can specify many things: URLs, action, HTML, and whatnot. Like these things are editable, but by default you get all of it for free. So you want to F submit with a custom text. It takes the first element. The first thing it takes is the text of a button. But because I created a partial in one place, I'm just going to leave it as is. I can say OK, right? And now both things will say OK, right? Both edit and new. Why do I want to do it? I want it to create a specific create doctor or update doctor. Or I can build in some logic into the partial saying if the path is this, or if the method, like World Zero Oyster.
Do that in the partial.
World Zero Oyster, that's just one way of doing that. We don't worry about it just yet, because these things will be handled by JavaScript and React once you progress further. But this is what's important here is the communication. But because I said we're going to talk about forms, but what's important is this param subject. Yeah.
So why in the labs were we using form_tag and then building out our own forms? But what was the point of not jumping straight to form 4?
Just probably to learn.
And also you use this when you're not actually saving data. So that
Form, yeah.
Search
But
forms would still
Also
be
form, I mean, you can do search form with anything, but with form 4, you can only do forms for models.
Oh, okay.
Because form 4 is only for a model. It's for a resource in your database. It can't work for anything else because like it has a model needs a model to function. That's why for the new path that only gives you the form, you still need to create an empty doctor for it to function. Normally you would just say just a form. If I was using form tag, I wouldn't need doctor new. Like that's not a thing. Anyway, so
Sorry, for the form part, it always be the strong ham, or is it supposed to be?
that's coming now. That's coming now. We do, I think. So let's get, if I remember correctly, we do. Now I'm going to show you what this whole thing with Dr. Params is, because we just written this here, and I said keep a mental tab on it. This is just a shortcut. For now, it just doesn't exist actually. I'm going to show you the normal way of creating as we've done it previously. So you create a doctor, you need a name and a specialty. So before, I think what's going to get generated is going to be params doctor name, right? And specialty is params doctor specialty. I think that's how this is. But let's see if it works. Dan specialty Italo Disco. Create doctor item. Here we go. Let's look at params. So that's this whole object. What we're interested in is this little bit. Doctor, name Dan, specialty Italo Disco, commit, create doctor, control doctors, action create, permitted false. So there's something wrong with it, right? I'm just going to make it continue, see what happens. this thing has worked correctly, and everything is fine, right? Apart from when it isn't. In general, you want to specify what are you enabling your users to post to your application. So for example, do I have Postman on here? No. How to make a post request to using curl. I always forget the syntax. So I'm going to make a post request, right, to my API using the command line. Exposed. Cool. So I want to do that. So I want to make a request to the doctor saying name equals Rob, specialty equals secret stuff. Yeah, thank you. And I want to post localhost 3000/doctors. As you know, post / doctors is the create method in our controller, right? That's set up implicitly by routes, right? In Sinatra we would do that explicitly, in here it's implicitly. So I'm going to press enter. Something happened, right? So using curl I made a request, which is fine. Something happened here. I'm going to look at the list of doctors, refresh that. Oh, I would expect that to have worked. Okay, what's the error? Oh boy. Let me try again. Curl name, specialty secret staff post, localhost 3000. Is that where my app lives? /doctors, yes. And there's a buyback in create. Let's look at browser routes. I don't want to spend too much time on it because this is a bit of an experiment. So doctors, get post, new doctor, post, goes to create, everything is correct. Maybe I'm passing a wrong. Let's see if that works. Sorry. Okay, I'll drop it because it's going to take too much time. I was trying to make a request unsuccessfully to using a command line to show you that I can pass in any kind of thing to my form, which is, I mean, to my controller, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you want to go and Google about GitHub, it's not script injection. It's actually it's even like sillier and simpler. GitHub hack 2014 admin form. Params. Yeah. So GitHub is run on Rails, right? Like majority of the GitHub stack is set by Ruby on Rails. There's this nice little article that you can Google for yourself that describes how someone figured out that you can essentially send any kind of post request to GitHub, and you can simply include in the parameters you send admin equals true, and it's going to set you up as an admin, effectively allowing all operations, right? And then there's a nice story about how people freaked out about it. As you can see, it was clearly just possible. So now Rails includes this small amount of functionality which basically says, hey, for this model, for this action, I allow only these parameters, and these are strong params, right? For next time, I can figure out how to make a post request successfully, and then I can show you that it wouldn't let me without specific stuff. Hmm? Mm-hmm.
Inspect the element.
Oh, I can add. Oh, nice. That's good. I want to look at it later because I've never done it that way. That's interesting. Which lab is it?
Strong
I could have guessed, couldn't I? Anyway, so you can see now that I'm defining a nice little method called Dr. Params. And Dr. Params essentially is a tiny filter that you define as follows. So you say params require, right, for the key of doctor to permit just name and specialty, nothing else, right? And now Dr. Params as a variable is a filtered version of the params allowing only this. Let's just confirm that our thing works as it's supposed. Maybe we need to link also show all doctors. No, that's a show. Link to create a new doc. The argument is new doctor path, I think. Cool. Dr. Dre, specialty making Eminem famous. Say doctor, and it works, right? If I was to edit the new form, that's how I'm going to do it. So f text field head creating doctor, no method. Ooh, well, I can't show this to you because form 4 will not even allow me to add elements in the form that don't map directly to the contents of the model properties, because there's no property head, so that's just going to say no, can't do that. Cool. I'll figure it out later on how to like prove to you that this thing doesn't work. In general, if you wanna, yeah, good job spelling. In general, if you wanna make API calls, and by API calls I mean like any kind of HTTP calls, right? I can refer to them as API, and that would mean the same thing. You can use an app called Postman, which is by far the most comfortable thing in the world to do so. Actually, we can maybe use it. Let me just take a look if we... Yeah, we kind of covered everything in terms of what we were supposed to build. The important part of today is that you go out and do the labs and whatever currently you're working on with understanding how Form 4 works, how can you include it as a partial, and how and why strong params are necessary, right? That's the gist. Let's see if Postman works. If it does, I'll show you some examples. But let's go back to what we've done. In the doctor's controller, also before action, it's not something you have to be doing. Essentially, the only thing you have to be doing is using strong params as a private method. But before action is just a nice little shortcut, because you will find yourself, as your controllers grow and as you do more and more stuff, you will see clearly how, you know, there's so much repetition that these kind of things become slowly more and more useful. So before action is a nice addition, not necessary for you to know, but use it so you get less clutter, especially visually. And I suggest you get Dr. Params, just like in general, the syntax for strong params in some kind of notes somewhere, so you can have always access to it. For like, I can't, if you put the gun to my head, I never can remember. Like, there's no way I can remember how these things work. Although it's quite simple, it just always like leaves my head. So like, keep it handy, yeah.
So the private method find will send the routes whatever that method returns into the
Not necessarily. Ruby enables us to, which we don't cover in the bootcamp program. Ruby has a concept. You've learned that in the intro about code blocks, right? And in the way that Ruby works, it enables you to inject blocks of code into different places. So if I say find doctor is a before action for the show method, for example, it's as if this was here, like that. You can think of it as copying code. It copy pastes it for you, but you don't see it. It's not that the return value is passed. Just think about it that way. The code has been put there for you, but you don't have to write it. It's called metaprogramming, when you write methods that write methods for you. But because that's what's happening. You say, hey, for these methods, please add these bits. We've got Postman. Maybe we've got 15 minutes, so we can install it. While this is doing its thing, hit me up with questions. Alice?
I guess it's not too dissimilar to how modules work in our Ruby.
Once again?
So in module 1, you cover the concept of modules
Yes.
and the way that you can call functions from modules inside custom versions inside classes.
Yes.
So for example, you might have a generic initialize method and class-specific ones, but you can call the generic code by using the super, calling super
Yeah.
inside a Ruby method.
Yeah.
It's not too dissimilar.
It is. It is very, very different.
Is it?
It is very different. It's not the concept of objects and classes. If I'm correct, which I may not be, Ruby blocks and procs and lambdas is something you want to look into if you want to understand it. It's about closures and how Ruby can transfer the execution context, if that's the correct name, to different places.
Okay.
It's not inheritance. It's not object-oriented stuff.
So
It's
it's not anything to do with that, right?
it's just like in JavaScript when you have closures and they remember the execution context in which they were called.
Okay.
It's a very similar situation, but it's Ruby. It's a bit different. Anyway, can I not log in to that? Can I just like skip? Nah, look, good UI. This is like the tiniest button they can give you. Okay, so I want to make a request. I want to make a post request, or maybe a get first, to localhost 3000. Could not get any response. I probably mistyped something. I want to go to localhost / yeah. Cool. So I made a get request to the /doctors page. You can see this is some HTML and these are the doctors. That's what I wanted to see. Everything works. So I'm going to make a post to /doctors now and pass in some params, which with name equal to Dan and specialty equal to chairs, right? And send it. I got something back. Exception called, so something's wrong. Ooh, I know that why it didn't work. I didn't make the correct request previously, but there's a nice little thing about Ruby on Rails is that it checks the authenticity yes, token of your request. So it's not like everyone can access your application by just posting to it. They have to have an authenticity token. In Polish, every word, just so you know, is accented on the penultimate syllable. So like the accent is always the same. So that's why I keep wanting to say authenticity instead of anyway. You can't do it unless you have a token from Rails. And this actually is present on every form. So if you look at the form, you can see there's an authenticity token with a value of something. Why don't I just copy it and see if that flies? Huh?
It doesn't change every time.
Oh, it does change for every request. Because when you make a request to get the form, Rails goes like, let me give him a token. So it creates a token, gives it to you, and now it waits for your browser, for your session to send that token back. Anything goes wrong, it just goes like, can't do it. Probably, yeah. Probably it's time constraint too. So authenticity token. Also, you see what I'm doing, right? Like this is kind of clear. It's just a nice interface to make a request. So I'm going to send it. Probably not going to work. It may not work also because there's more stuff that gets sent with the request. Do you know what that is? We're going to talk about it next week. Cookies? Yeah? Yeah, so there's one more thing that gets probably checked, which is whether I'm making the request from a browser that has these cookies in. But don't want to elaborate on that. It's something to do with stuff that we're going to talk about next week. A great unsuccessful little session of trying to post stuff, but let's use some kind of mock API like JSON placeholder API. You heard of that? So it's a nice little, as the name implies, it's just a placeholder API where you can get stuff from the internet for any kind of practice you want to do with APIs. So for example, they have a to-dos API, and they can give you a to-do, which is just like a mock-up data bit. Like to-dos, all of them will be, I don't know, 100 of these. They also have posts. So you go to here /posts. So I'm going to plug this in here and just get an array of like 100 or 1,000 posts, right? And I'm showing that to you because I think Postman, which you will, I mean, you get the name, right? It's the Postman, sending stuff. That's why it's funny. You will use that extensively. I suggest you should from approximately now-ish, but specifically from Module 3. This tool will be invaluable to you as a developer in general. That's like that's the real thing. That's a professional tool to like test APIs, and it has a lot of automation and whatnot. But what's most important is that it saves you from doing that. Where was it? Like writing these atrocious curl things. Like it's fine, and if you want to like show off, but it, you do one typo and you have to rewrite the whole thing again. And that can memorize things, that can remember things. You can create collections of requests, whatnot. It's a really cool tool. But yeah, so lesson learned. We kind of went through quickly with the lecture itself. So I tried to make a post that didn't work. So we got a tiny security lesson about how Rails is actually authenticating this. And funnily enough, if you go to Rails documentation, which page was it? Rails API. If you go to Rails documentation, in terms of security and what they tell you is that spoof. Yeah. This is a list of things that Rails is doing for you, right? Security. Rails detects and thwarts IP spoofing attacks and handles cryptographic signatures in a timing attack-aware way. Don't know what an IP spoofing attack or timing attack is? Exactly. So these things will happen in Rails. If that was Sinatra, I could have made that request, and I've done that in the past where it's like, oh, let's test it out, and then I just make a request from the command line. Everything works. Rails is a batteries included package, and it just handles so much for us that even this is not allowed until I specifically set Rails up in a way that it can authenticate me and say, yes, this man is allowed to do that, right? But I like to show people this sentence because this sentence kind of neatly and a bit cheekily explains to you what Rails is, right? Like, look, that's what we're doing here for you. Don't even know what it is. Sit down and do the creative stuff because we handle that for you. Make sense? Cool. So once again, because we went off topic, what's important from today? First of all, we can create partials, which is awesome. So because it enables you not to write in two places. Form 4 is a form tag for model-aware forms. So Rails will know how to handle them. They come with, just a second, they come with functionality and constraints, as you've seen. And they give you a lot of functionality. Like Rails figures out on which kind of path you are, what kind of controller you're in, and depending on that sets the stuff for the form 4. But that, as I like to repeat over and over again, it depends on whether you have been nice to Rails in terms of naming things. Because if you change the names of the folders, change the name of the controllers, and things don't align, Rails will not figure this out. So something I'm doing, but you can't see because I'm not mentioning that, is that, first of all, I'm sticking to the convention of naming the actual views the way I'm naming them. And in the controller, I never mention which template to render because I have the names of the methods the same as the names of the views for a controller for the model that's called the same in the views folder too. That's the way it works. If I had renamed anything in the chain, this wouldn't work. So I'd have to manually do that. So that power, that implicity, comes with a cost of sticking to the naming convention. And when you'll be building your project, you will realize that if you want to do something custom that's just not setting up new instances of models, you will have to specify everything. Obviously using Rails syntax, so it's kind of nicer, but still, this simplicity only works. It's not magic. It just takes the names of your variables and controllers and methods and classes and just knows where to go depending on that. That's the only way it works. Roman?
Your form view is titled underscore form. Presumably
That's how you do partials. If it wasn't underscore, it wouldn't understand. That thing wouldn't work.
Yeah, and presumably so that you can then do something like